Have you ever heard of the mantra, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Well, Sucker Punch apparently took that to heart with their approach of Ghost of Yotei, as they took the perfected formula of its predecessor and basically kept it as is, with only making some refinements to the weaker parts of that amazing title. Ghost of Yotei is the definition of a fantastic sequel that plays it overly safe. Kicking things off with the game, it's no secret that there is some advancements in the technology used in Ghost of Yotei when compared to its predecessor. Specifically, when it comes to the game's lighting and level of detail, especially during the cutscenes, this game truly shines. If you are playing this game on an OLED display with full HDR, it is an absolute treasure to look at. The game looks absolutely phenomenal, and the main protagonist, Atsu, definitely has aura to her in all the aspects of the game as you play through her story. When it comes to the actual story itself, this is where there's some differences between this and Ghost of Tsushima. Atsu's storyline is one of a prototypical revenge tale. It's the same story that you've heard time and time again, where you and your family was wronged and you seek out revenge. That is the gist of Atsu's tale. Whereas in Ghost of Tsushima, that tale was about saving your land while contemplating the method of which you save it, because in order to save it, you have to forego your honor as a samurai, which is something that your father is adamant against. So when it comes to the actual narrative of Ghost of Yotei, there's two things that stood out for me personally. First and foremost, the overall story itself, in my opinion, is not as good as its predecessor. The typical revenge tale has been done time and time again, and this is no different, and there was no real surprises for me. Every single twist and turn, for the most part, I saw coming, because this is a traditional revenge story. Whereas when you compare it to Ghost of Tsushima, Tsushima's story focuses on you trying to save your land, and that whole inner turmoil of you have to abandon your honor as a samurai and do the unhonorable thing in order to save your land, which also, of course, creates an issue with your father, who's totally against you foregoing your honor, and creates an enemy within yourself. Furthermore, with the story itself, there just felt like the world of Tsushima reacted to your choices depending on how you played. If you played honorably, the weather would reflect that. If you played dishonorably, the weather would also reflect that. So when it comes to the overarching story, I do think Ghost of Tsushima has the better story. However, Ghost of Yotei does a better job of telling the story. I think that is the big difference here between the two games when it comes to a story perspective, is that Ghost of Tsushima's, the side quests in Tsushima kind of feel disconnected from the main story, whereas in Yotei, everything is tied to your story. And this is also amplified further by the way the open world works. So one of the things I talked about at the beginning of this review was how they made refinements to the weaker aspects of Tsushima. One of those refinements comes in the form of the open world itself. Essentially, Yotei's world feels far more alive, far more natural. You'll traverse the world and you will discover things just happening on the fly. You'll go mind your own business and you discover something here that perks your attention. You go for it. Other things can happen, such as, because the story does put a bounty on your character's head, as you progress through the story, you could get spontaneously jumped or ambushed by people trying to claim the bounty on your head. Side quests themselves, the stories behind those side quests directly tie to Atsu's story, whereas Tsushima's felt disjointed. So when it comes to the method of which the story is told, Yotei does a better job, because the open world and the side quests are all tied to that story, and it makes the open world feel much more alive. Where in Tsushima's case, while I do think the main story was better, the world was disconnected from your main character's story from a narrative perspective, and the original Tsushima title did have the more Ubisoft approach where you follow markers and things like that. The world in Tsushima didn't feel as alive as it does in Yotei. One of the other refinements that Yotei did, specifically when it comes to the gameplay, is the way the game is played. While general combat and moving around the world is the same, one of the tweaks is that you no longer change fighting styles. In Tsushima, you would change fighting styles, to which at that point you would pick your weapon and you would change styles to counter the opponent's style. In Yotei, you change weapons. Every weapon basically has a rock, paper, scissors approach to it, where it's strong against one, weak against another. So as opposed to Tsushima, where you would pick your favorite weapon and run it the entire time, Yotei forces you to use different weapons in order to effectively counter what your opponent's weapon is and make the combat easier, especially when it comes to dealing with bosses. Now, much like Tsushima, the combat was great in Tsushima. The combat is even better in Yotei. All the little refinements that they've made, including changing the weapons, really make the combat much better. And one of my favorite aspects about Tsushima, and it's still one of my favorite aspects in Yotei, is the duels that you encounter when you do one-on-one duels against bosses. The fights are absolutely fantastic. The combat is really, really good. And it feels good to just fight everything you see. It's really, really good. And that's to be expected because Tsushima's combat was really good as well. One of the newer additions, however, to Yotei that was not present in Tsushima is the method of which they use the DualSense controller. The DualSense controller's features such as the touchpad, the haptics on the triggers, all of which are utilized in different ways and are all implemented and ingrained into the game. Almost as if Sucker Punch was essentially, for better or worse, forced to do so. While I do think these little interactions were great to change up the gameplay, it also became repetitive throughout the game because everything seemed to be doing it. You want to start a campfire? You're going to do a DualSense minigame. You want to play your instrument? There's another DualSense minigame. These little minigames, while varies the gameplay, they are basically forced on every different little things, and there's so much of it that over time it did become a little repetitive for me, but it did a nice job of spicing things up. Overall though, Ghost of Yotei is a fantastic sequel, provided you go into it expecting more of Ghost of Tsushima. If your mindset is you want more Ghost of Tsushima with a different story and basically refine all the weakest parts of it, that is what's here. They took the formula that was already perfected, addressed some of the criticisms, and made the game as good as it possibly can. The trade-off, however, there's nothing really new. There's nothing that you haven't seen here before. It's just little refinements. And again, going back to my opening statement, Ghost of Yotei really is a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of product. They played it overly safe. And depending on what your expectations are, depends on how you're going to resonate with this game, story aside. Because at the end of the day, how you enjoy the game really depends on what your expectations are. If you're expecting this next big evolutionary open world game set in the Ghosts universe, you're going to be disappointed. But if you go into this game thinking, I just want more and better Tsushima, then you're going to be satisfied with this game. What is here is absolutely fantastic. Do not take that for granted. Ghost of Yotei is a fantastic title. It is just a fantastic title that doesn't do anything new, that has some repetitive mini games depending on how you feel about them. But overall, to me, the good things about Ghost of Yotei is that it takes everything from Tsushima and makes it better and refines and improves on any of the weaknesses that were present in its predecessor. The cons for Ghost of Yotei is that it does absolutely nothing new in terms of a gameplay standpoint, and of course, the story may not be as strong for you depending on how you felt about Tsushima. And I can't spoil the outlook of the story, but it's safe to say that, at least for me, in my opinion, I fall into the category of Yotei's story was just not as good as Tsushima. It was better told, but overall, it just wasn't as good. So when it comes to how I see Yotei as a fantastic sequel to those who want more Tsushima, and I do highly recommend the game to those who really, really want more of Tsushima. But if you're tired of the open world formula, if you're looking for something new in the open world formula, that is not here, and you may want to hold back on your purchase depending on how much of that evolution you are looking for or how fatigued you are of open world games. So overall, I'm giving Ghost of Yotei a 9 out of 10. It is a fantastic sequel to an amazing PlayStation game, and one that I highly recommend to those seeking more of the Ghost's world. This is Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.